What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's LUMIX Live. We've got a much more demonstration-heavy stream for this particular week. I'm planning to, as the description shows, I'm planning to kind of set up a 3-series kind of program here over the next number of weeks to basically go through and bring everything back to kind of like a core basics. It's been a long time since I think I've done a stream where everything's kind of condensed. You've got, kind of clear checkpoints of this is how you do X, Y, and Z. This is where X, Y, and Z is in the menus. And then also having it kind of broken down between general overall functionality of the camera, photography-based functionality in the cameras, and then videography-based functionality in the cameras. So, over the next number of weeks, I already have a number of kind of topics set, ready to go that I want to cover, demonstrations that I want to go through each week so that we can actually timestamp these correctly and make it maybe a little bit easier to find some of this stuff. So as we go through this week's stream, let me know if there are particular things that maybe I miss in a certain section that you want to see a little bit more coverage of, so I can definitely loop back and cover some of those pieces. But also think ahead for the next couple of streams. Are there certain things, if you are a photographer, are there certain things in the cameras that you want to have some clarity on? How do I access this feature? How do I use this feature? Can the camera do this? So that I can put together more than just what my brain has kind of put together. There's a lot of stuff in the cameras that I know about. There's a lot of ways that you all use the cameras, though, that I'm not always the best prepared to give you super clear information off the cuff. So as we go through these different streams, definitely, give us the feedback. Let me know in the comment section down below. It's a little bit easier for me to track if it's in the comments, not in the chat field. But that's a good segue to point out that if you have questions or you have certain topics or pieces of the camera that you want me to talk about today, drop that as a comment in the chat here. Make sure to tag at Lumix USA. This way it just kind of pops up. I can see it on my side, and it's easy to, find them and be able to kind of address some of them. So unlike the last couple of streams, this will be more demonstration heavy. We will answer questions, so I will make sure that we've got some time for more generalized questions. We'll do a little bit at the beginning, and then I'll do a couple more at the end. This way I can chop it up a little bit easier. If you are new to these broadcasts, these are weekly-ish live streams that we do to give you, the community, access to the brand directly. So you can speak, ask questions, give us feedback, positive or negative, whatever it is, directly to the brand, and not have to filter things through some of the other online kind of platforms where you're probably getting 10 different answers from 10 different people, and none of them are directly connected, so most of them have no clue what the actual answers are. So now you've got a direct piece to be able to say, hey, I spoke to Sean or Lumix directly, or this is a piece of information from Lumix directly. And just kind of go from there. If you want to interact with us, like I said, just tag at Lumix USA. As you can see, a bunch of people are doing. That lets me just see it a little bit easier on my side. And then, if you are in the United States, we do have the Lumix Pro service available. It is a red and a platinum tier program. The red tier is free if you've got a new Lumix camera over the holiday season, or you just picked up your first camera and it happens to be a Lumix. You can follow the QR code right below me or link down in the description. Get yourself registered on red tier. It's free. There is a platinum tier of service and support. The platinum tier is a paid level service, but that's going to get you the 3-year extended manufacturer warranty that is included in red. But on top of that, you're going to get 2-day repairs with next day shipping both ways, 20% off out of warranty repairs, annual sensor cleanings, lens calibration, firmware updates, just general systems checks. If you prefer to have us do that instead of maybe something that you want to do yourself, You also get access to a membership hotline if you're someone who would rather speak to a person for more technical kinds of issues. So that number is available, and it's Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., so you'll have access to that. And then, you also get a welcome kit with it as well. So if you're interested in those programs, you can follow the QR code right below me. Get yourself checked out, get yourself registered. At bare minimum, sign up for the red tier. The red tier is free. It comes included, and it extends your manufacturer warranty. So this way, if anything ever were to happen from a manufacturing perspective, you'd be covered longer than traditional. So I want to address one very specific question or comment that was made just before the stream went live. Those of you that follow on Reddit or Discord or in YouTube comments or Facebook, there is a rumor going around that the S12E has halted production. I want to be very clear. It is not true. The S12E is still current, still in production. There's no discontinuing, none of that. The situation, what happened was, and I've already spoken with the person who asked this question, so also do not go out there and rail against someone who is reporting information that they received in error. There was a miscommunication about an out-of-stock item on one of the web pages. It is not discontinued. It is still currently in production. There's no plans for it to be discontinued. So I just want to clear that up. Rumors and things like that start to get, spread like wildfire. And it goes to that point of you read something on a forum where there's no outside perspective to kind of refute or support or give any kind of feedback to what that person or that situation was. And through the community, through asking the question in Discord, which, by the way, we have a link down in the description for the Discord as well, through communicating over on Discord and communicating over on Reddit, I was able to connect with the person that actually posted the original post about it and get the clarity and kind of update everyone on to what kind of happened there. There are some situations when websites or platforms may automatically list something as discontinued if it's out of stock. There are situations when a service support rep may not be fully informed or may use the wrong term to describe something of either a certain kit variant or a model specific thing, or maybe they just use the wrong term. And this was just a case of the person using the wrong term. So just want to confirm that for y'all. The camera is still current. If you're looking for one and you want to pick up an S12E, in fact, it's the camera that we're demoing on today, they are available. Some dealers, some outlets just may be out of stock of them. It is a step up over an S5 II, S5 IIX series if you want the features and kind of fit and finish of the S12 series, but you don't want to have necessarily the cost to go for a partially stacked sensor, or you don't need high resolution. So it really fits as a comfortable, way up into the S12 platform. So all of that out of the way, let's take a look at some of the other questions or comments that came through here and address a few of them before we go into today's topic, which is back to the basics on general settings and general capabilities of your Lumix cameras. Brennan says, if possible, can you start posting clips of these streams for certain aspects of the camera? You're always covering amazing features, and I forget where to find them in the streams later. I'm glad you asked that, because it's actually one of the reasons why I want to do the next couple of streams very kind of regimented in order and to a relatively strict script of the topics that I want to cover. This way, it's a lot easier, even on our side, it's a lot easier to go through, clip them, cut them, bring them over, and then be able to post them somewhere else as shorts, or a little bit easier to find kind of pieces of information for you. So look out for that coming in the near future. We're starting with this set of streams as well, so that we can, kind of be able to go through those. That just reminds me, let me set up my local recording for this as well. All right. Future products, we don't answer questions or anything about that, or speculation. Last question. Lumix. I'm guessing you mean Lumix Tether via Wi-Fi. Lumix Tether via Wi-Fi, I can ask again with that. I know, if I remember right, I think we did have a unit a long time ago that was able to, like when we first launched it, that had it, but there were some challenges with PC and Mac OS compatibility. So I don't think it ever kind of continued. I don't even know if it ever actually made it out. But let me chat with the engineering team on that side and see if that's something that's feasible to be done with the modern cameras. Outside of it, you know, obviously you've got USB connectivity, you've got the USB to Ethernet connectivity on the compatible cameras that have that, so that you can get that faster connection and reliability there. Outside of that, you do have Wi-Fi tether functionality to capture one if you are using the S12 series. That was part of one of the updates a couple of months ago. So if you are a photographer using tether functionality with your cameras and you happen to have an S12 series camera, so that's the E, the S12, or the S1R2, from a photographer's perspective, Capture One can work via Wi-Fi for tethered camera control and capture. You don't just have to use the USB functions for that. Let's see here. Thank you for your support on Discord for sorting out AF issues. Might be beneficial to talk about it here. Yeah, when I get to the photography and the video specific topics, I'm going to dive into autofocus and systems. And honestly, the conversation you and I had over on Discord is part of what made me kind of want to take a step back and do a basics series again and kind of go through. This way I can keep my ideas together, you know, put a more formalized set of information out there that's a little bit easier to find and search through. How does the communication on image stabilized lenses work on Sigma and Leica lenses for Lumix S cameras? Can you explain the concept of stops of image stabilization? Yeah, so as far as how the communications work between the lenses and the cameras, there are certain parts of the L-mount communication standard that the manufacturers have to have enabled in their systems, or they have to have the hardware compatible to make things like dual IS work. To my knowledge, I don't 100% know if it's fully implemented out there the same exact way that it is in our cameras and lenses. So as an example, dual IS2, some of the stuff that we do with the way the system works is we match the in-body gyro sensors with sensors in the lenses, with the way the design and the control of how our optic system works and our optic stabilization works, so that we can accurately pair them together. When you're working with another optic, even if it's on the same communication standard and part of the alliance, the hardware might not be there in all of the optics, because remember, a lot of optics that are out in the market, especially in the L-mount or in the Sigma system, one, they're typically dual built, so they are the mirrorless series, so they're probably more designed to balance between the L-mount and the E-mount. So if it's something that isn't able to be supported across both, sometimes that can cause a challenge in manufacturing. But more often than not, it's just that some of the optics existed before the specs were updated, or the alliance was joined, or the development cycles of products may not have lined up. So you'll start to see things over time move more and more into specifications. Sometimes it's not always just, you snap your fingers and everything's aligned. Sometimes there just weren't considerations for pieces in hardware prior to a certain date. Now, as far as stops of image stabilization goes, what does that actually mean? So there are different ways that we kind of judge effectiveness of stabilization, right? There's the lab tested, which is where the stops of image stabilization comes from. And then there's the kind of much more subjective, opinionated the feel of how good the stabilization is. How floaty is it? How locked on is it? How much do the corners warp or wiggle or whatever? Stops of image stabilization are a measurement based on a few known parameters, or a few accepted parameters. Let's put it that way. The traditional mindset was that if you wanted to be able to handhold an image with a lens, you needed to effectively shoot no slower shutter speed than 1 over the focal length of the lens. So as example, a 24mm wide-angle lens, if you are with a system that has no stabilization, you theoretically should be able to capture a solid still image at 1/24th of a second, or 1/25th of a second shutter speed offhand. So holding the camera, you should be able to get that image. That would be the common accepted principle. As lenses got longer and longer, it became a little bit more important. So when you got to super telephoto lenses like a 500mm or 100-500, you would need to say, hey, I shouldn't be shooting slower than 1/500th of a second to cancel out motion that could be picked up as I'm taking that picture, because of the shutter being open too long for how much motion gets amplified the more telephoto you get. So this has been the go-to basics of getting a stable image for decades and decades. The introduction of lens stabilization broke those rules, because now it wasn't necessary to keep it to 1 over the focal length. You could start to push the boundaries. Early stabilization systems that were in lens only were marginally effective. So, if we go to that 500mm lens, say instead of 500th of a second, you're getting, 250th of a second. So, okay, cool. I'm getting, a stop slower. Great. Not always the most effective. Now that we're into the modern era, where you've got in-body stabilization, magnetic systems, you got dual IS system that pairs optic and lens, you start getting into these figures of 7 stops, 8 stops. And then most recently, CIPA, which is the organization, CIPA, updated their specifications to say, hey, there is a difference in stabilization effect between the center and then the periphery of a lens. So now modern cameras, I believe, after that were introduced later half of 2025, maybe even into the early part of 2025, you'll typically now start seeing 2 ratings on some spec sheets that'll say here's the center, here's the periphery. But those numbers are all typically going to be around 7 stop, 8 stop, at least from us. What that is indicating is that theoretically, if I am taking a photograph and my shutter speed or my focal length is 500, I could effectively shoot 7, or whatever the number is, 7 shutter speed full stops slower, and still cancel out the motion that would be picked up because of a slow shutter speed and hand movement of the lens because of the focal length. It gets more complicated when you start looking at resolution impacts on this. Higher resolution cameras reduce that number as well. If you start going into the 45 megapixel and higher, you start actually having to be a lot more careful with the resolution. And if you are an astrophotographer or star trail or night sky photographer, you are aware of this. There's the old school rule of the 500 rule, and then there's the new NPF rules for judging what your exposure should be to get pinpoint stars. And the newer one accounts for resolution. Higher resolution means you pick up minor movement details more or earlier in the shutter speed process. So that's really what stops of image stabilization from a technical perspective encompasses. It's how many stops slower than 1 over the focal length of the lens that's used for testing should you be able to expect. There are a lot of parameters involved with it. You usually have to read different manufacturers' footnotes to see what the testing methodology is. Typically with ours, it's either a 70-200 or a 24-105 or a 20-60, depending on what camera is being talked about. And it'll tell you what aperture, what focal length the ratings are at, and what camera was used to give you that information. It's a lot of stuff that, in general, I think everyone does a pretty good job of making sure that you as the user are aware of that information. But that's what stops of image stabilization in general is. Future vision stuff we don't really talk about. Okay, S12 is all good. Can we talk about the future vision? So we don't talk about future plans, products, things like that. Catching up on some of the chat here. The S12E is selling actually really well. It is just sold out. Okay, cool. I think everyone's got the kind of addressed in the answer for that part of it. All right, let's go into the actual topic that I have for today. We'll do this and then keep asking your questions. We're going to address more of them at the end of the stream. So I have 6 topics that I have put together already that I wanted to kind of really chat about quickly and be pretty concise with them as I can. These are the more general controls on your Lumix camera, because I find often I get asked questions of, how do I get certain things with the monitor or the viewfinder? How do I get certain things to work? Or troubleshooting of, hey, I got the camera, I put it to my face and nothing happens. What did I do wrong? So, like I said, I've got my S1 Mark IIe hooked up here, and we're going to go through a couple pieces here of the monitor and the EVF. So the monitor being the rear LCD panel, the EVF obviously being the viewfinder, the one you look through. Little known is that in our cameras, and for the vast majority of cameras, you've got a number of controls and settings available to you to adjust the way the viewfinder and the EVF work that probably fit your particular style of use maybe better than others. So to start with, if you go into the menu, you'll see that you have the wrench icon, which is our setup menu. So this is typically stuff that you're not often going to have to go in and change. So Wi-Fi, monitor settings, backlight settings, firmware updates, clock reset, all that kind of stuff is typically in here. But if you go to the second subpage, which is your monitor and display options, you'll see a couple of things here, and you may not realize that these kinds of things exist. So for one, your power saving modes. I just recently had a number of troubleshooting situations with some users that kept having issues where the camera was just going to sleep on them and they didn't know why. They never changed anything. They weren't really sure, but the only difference is that they would put the camera down, come back, and the camera's off, and they didn't know why, and it kind of panicked them. So you have a couple of different options. By default, the cameras usually have a sleep mode or an auto LVF monitor off, turned on by default. This is usually power saving functionality that's done out of the box just for kind of consistency, making sure that, hey, the average person's going to use the camera, you're going to have this expectation, this is just what our standard was set for it. So if you are someone who uses your camera enough, you're good at being able to power on and power off the camera as you're using it throughout the day, and you don't necessarily worry about, hey, I want the camera to go to sleep all the time, you can change these. You can extend them out to 10 minutes, so it's 1, 2, 5, and 10 minutes. You can completely turn them off if you want. It is going to give you the warning that, hey, you've turned off the power saving option. You may actually be burned through more battery than you may expect. This is kind of obvious because the device is being left on longer. But then you also have auto LVF and monitor off. This is another one where if you don't want the camera to go to full sleep, but you'd rather have the display or the viewfinder turn off automatically when you're not going to be using it, you can change these as well. These will go from 1, 2 to 5 minutes. As you see on my cameras, I typically leave these things off because I'm constantly, I turn the camera on when I need it, and I don't really ever care about it going to sleep. and often I don't want it to go to sleep. But you'll see one other setting here, and this is a more common across Lumix cameras, at least over the last 5 to 8 years. There's an option in the power saving mode menu called Power Save LVF Shooting. In earlier cameras, this was something that would be turned on automatically. So this is totally independent of the general sleep or the general LVF EVF modes. This is a trigger that you can set depending on the display mode that you're in to auto sleep the camera. Now, some people may remember, if you've been with us long enough, there was a little bit of I think it was the GH5, one of our firmware updates, we had changed this to something like 2 seconds, and it was set on while recording standby or something, or just in live view. So if you just put the camera down in 2 seconds, it would put the camera to sleep. Obviously, we don't want that. There was a firmware update that came out and very quickly changed that. But if you're someone who uses your camera often and you want to be able to say, hey, if my camera's not in use and I'm on a certain display or I'm just in general settings, I want the camera to be able to just quickly turn off. I don't want to wait 1 minute. I don't want to wait any of the extra time. You can come in here and turn one of these settings on, 1 second to 10 seconds. So these are much, much shorter. And then you can change method of activation, control panel or recording standby. Now, to put that in perspective, what is what mode? Recording standby is anytime you have the screen visible like you do here. Control panel is when you have this display on. This is the, a bunch of people call it the Big Six because one of our competitors finally came to the light and realized that, one, we've had us as a brand and the industry has had this for decades. This is our Vericam menu. So you have your 6 options. You have frame rate, shutter speed, iris, which is aperture for the photographers if you don't know that. ISO, photo style, white balance, and this is a full touch setup. You can set the camera up so that, hey, if I have this set on the menu, so I have the back of my camera only shows this menu, I want it to say, hey, after 10 seconds, put the camera to sleep. In a lot of your use cases, it's probably not something you're going to want, but you have it as an option in here should you want to have more power saving. The last thing I'm going to mention here, and this is a difference from the S5 series and older, is that if you are trying to work with continuous autofocus in video, but you want to change how it functions, you have those options now in the power save menu. Power save menu here, you'll see says continuous video autofocus. If I go in here, it says constant or during record. Constant means that when I'm in standby, I am not recording video, it's going to allow continuous autofocus. During record means that when I'm in standby, it's not going to run the autofocus system unless I half press the shutter or press the AF on button. Instead, it will only automatically activate continuous when I actually hit start recording and I'm recording a clip. If you're using these cameras for things like webcam use or live streaming like I'm doing here, you're going to want to make sure this is set to constant so that you get that effect. You get that I don't have to hit record on the camera. I'm okay to just let the autofocus run and provide me the image. Next up is monitor frame rate. A lot of people may not realize that you have options to change how the refresh rate of the monitor and the viewfinder are displayed on your camera. By default, a lot of the cameras are out of the box set to 30 frames per second. Again, this is usually a thing for power saving and just battery management out of the box, but you have the options to change these yourself. You can up it to 60 frames per second. So if we go into, some of the video game world, a lot of people claim they can't tell a difference between 30 and 60 frames per second. 60 frames per second, it is going to be smoother. It's going to get you a cleaner looking display. And this one for monitor frame rate is going to address just the rear panel. So the rear LCD of the camera. Underneath that, you're going to see LVF frame rate. If you've got one of the cameras that has an option to do 120 frames per second, you may notice that it doesn't do that out of the box. If you want to enable that, you're going to do that in this menu. Monitor display option gives you LVF frame rate from 60, which is default, to 120 frames per second. Now be aware, 120 frames per second, you may get a resolution reduction in some of the viewfinder applications, but your refresh rate is much, much higher. So if you're shooting really fast action, really fast sports, and you want to have a smoother display in the viewfinder, you can come in here and change this to 120 frames per second. It's going to just give you a cleaner display. Same thing like we do with computer screens and TVs and frame rates that we record at. Higher frame rate means that it's typically more silky smooth in its output. 60 frames per second, though, is a pretty solid, smooth performance outside of pretty specific use cases. Last couple things here. Monitor settings. If I go into this option, and I have to actually just move my face cam here. Move this one here for now. Monitor settings. If you want to have more control over the actual LCD and the viewfinder as far as things like brightness of the viewfinder, the contrast of the viewfinder, saturation, the tint for red and the green tint, you have some editing controls here to be able to shift what your viewfinder's color tonality is or its contrast and its brightness outside of just the backlighting. And backlighting's the secondary thing that you have access to, which if we go back into that menu there, we'll bring this up. Next up is backlight. Backlight out of the box is going to be set to auto. Some of you may notice that if you go from indoor to outdoor, or if you are pointing the camera at a really, really bright light source, the rear screen can kind of get really dim. Or if I'm outdoors, all of a sudden it gets really, really, really bright. This can change that. If you don't want to have the rear LCD backlighting changing based on the scenario that you're in, you can come in here and set this to something like 0, which means that it's constant. It's not going to adjust up or down as far as intensity goes. So if you use your rear screen to give you a better indication of exposure judgment, make sure to come in and set this. Go, set it to monitor backlight 0. If you're outdoors, of course, you can increase this. If you're indoors, of course, you can decrease this. But anything that you can use to kind of get it off of auto to normalize how you're viewing your image through the LCD. And then if you notice, if you want to make changes to the viewfinder brightness and the viewfinder color correction, you just have to look through the viewfinder while you're in this menu, or do what I'm doing, which is just trigger the sensor on the viewfinder, and you'll see if it changes to viewfinder, I get the same settings that I had there. And then if I go to luminance, I can also change the luminance of the viewfinder as well and set them all to 0. This way I've got a normalized central set of exposure. So that was a whole lot for monitor and EVF settings. Let me break this up a little bit by going back and taking a look at some of the comments and questions that have gone through, because I see there's a couple going back and forth. Let's see here. Please add keyboard shortcuts to the Lumix Tether desktop app. This is way better than using a mouse specifically for taking photos. I will pass that on to the engineering team. Nobody in the camera market really banks on fast charging for its batteries. Panasonic being the battery giant it is, maybe the topic of fast charging capable camera batteries came up. Wondering. That's a good question. Fast charging that we see in our mobile devices, in cars and motorcycles and all of that kind of stuff is definitely something that I think as technology moves forward, as requirements for these different things are fleshed out as far as size of products, it's an interesting concept. I think it's safe to say that we're relatively past the concerns about damage of fast charging. Not completely. There are still concerns that you want to keep in mind about, how many cycles can you charge? How fast can it charge? The temperatures involved with the battery and charging. But what a lot of times I don't think people take into consideration is, one, cameras run very specific driven and designed processors. So they're not multi-purpose SoCs like our phones are. They don't typically have any kind of fancy extra additional, hardware for fast charging or stuff like that. Usually a lot of those tend to be either patented technologies from different companies, or there's something that you have to have specific ICs to control. The other piece that often gets a little bit overlooked is thermal implications. We've been very clear over the years that if you use USB-C plug-in power on the cameras using our 9-volt 3-amp, which is what our system is designed for, if you use 9-volt 3-amp and you're charging and running the camera in one of the more demanding modes, you are introducing additional heat into the system, not just into the battery, but into the circuitry. The USB-C circuitry to charge the batteries can generate heat. They run typically a lot harder when they're really kind of pushing a lot of power into the system. So I'd say, is fast charging something that, as far as USB-C, could see light of day in cameras? Possibly. The reality is that technology, as far as maintaining thermals, the use case applications, what its practical design would need to be to implement into these kinds of chassis in a safe way, in a way that doesn't impact other operations of the camera, in ways that don't degrade materials. All of that stuff kind of has to be solved and kind of figured out. Yes, we are one of the largest battery manufacturers out there, but the fast charging side of it would be not just down to battery solutions. A lot of that is also down into the core hardware for motherboard, CPU, controller units, USB-C control units, stuff like that. Where did we go? Let's see here. Does increasing backlight help with autofocus in any way? No. The backlighting, the monitor changes that I just went through, these are all just interaction changes for it. So let's see here. Can you add rate photo and delete photo option in LUMIX Lab? I can ask about that. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's move on to the second set of topics here, which is shortcuts. Many of you that have been working with the LUMIX cameras for a long time probably know a lot of these shortcuts and these capabilities that we have, but there are faster ways to access a number of capabilities within our cameras without having to actually dive through the menu systems to find that one option and add it somewhere so you can make a minor change. And all of this really kind of comes down to the function buttons or the quick menu. So let's talk about the quick menu first. So within our camera, you'll notice that in the newest series, under the setup menu, you have an option for Q menu settings. So this will be under the gear icon and then under operations on the first page, and it's called Q.menu settings. You've probably pressed the Q menu button, you probably use it already. But little known is there's a couple different ways that you can use this depending on how you want the system to look. There's layout differences, there's ways to control what values you want to change on it, and there's separate Q menus for the photo mode and the video side operations. So if we take a look at this pretty quickly here, you'll see layout style right now I've got as mode 1. So if I go back out and I press the Q menu, you see that we've got the traditional quick menu. The layout that we've been using for years. It's the panel on the right with the strip on the bottom that gives you the information, and you have a clear, unobstructed view of the image that is being captured. Some users, if you've been around the LUMIX line long enough, know that we had a little bit of a different way to do this. So if I go into layout style again, and I change this to mode 2, now when I click on the Q menu, it's a different option that you see here. On the camera itself, you lose visibility of the actual previewed image, and you only see what's in the box on the top there. This gives me access much closer to what you see in LUMIX Lab or in LUMIX Sync, depending on the cameras that you're using. You still have your options. So in this case, I still have my rec file format, my rec qualities, the image area, all of that kind of stuff available to make changes. But again, the downside is that on the camera itself, I don't have visibility of what's actually behind that menu. So I'm having to give up looking at my screen, my framing, or seeing the changes just because I'm in this menu. So for modern use cases, this is why we default to mode 1. So when I press the Q menu, I still get a live preview of what's happening in front of the screen as I make changes, which makes a lot more sense if I'm doing things like working with color profile shifts. Now, when you go into the Q menu system, you're going to notice a couple of different things here. I'm going to move this camera here for now. So when you actually go into the Q menu system, you're going to notice a couple of different things. I mentioned that you have front dial assignment. Front dial assignment is just which dial on the front side dial, what do you want it to do? So when I click into this, I can have it change the item, or I can change the value of the item. Item means as I rotate the front command dial, or the dial that's on the front of the camera or right by the shutter button, this means that it's going to actually select what item I want to select, whether it's rec mode, frame rates, resolution, photo style, whatever it is. Value means that it's going to change the value of what I'm set on. So by default, this is set to value. Then when we come down, we'll see item customize for photo mode and item customize for video and slow and quick. So if we look at the item customized for video here, you'll see I can just pick what I want here. So I have the rec format options set up right now for video. If I come into here, I have, 3 pages worth of different options available that I can change that particular option to. So let me back out so I don't change it. So right now I've got rec file format. So this is going to say, do I want to shoot MP4, MP4 Lite, MOV, ProRes RAW, whatever the options are. When I go to rec quality, this is what is the actual recording quality option that I want within what I've set before. I also have image area video on my particular setup here. Again, if I didn't want that, I could change that to hybrid zoom. I could change that to stabilization. Whatever I want this to be, I can change it. You have up to 12 of these that you can customize and change so that your most important things that you want to adjust or change or alter are as far away as one button press and maybe a couple of dial spins. It's all designed to just give you more compatibility, more customization, and more flexibility, so you're not having to dive into the full-blown menu, hence why it's called the quick menu. The nice thing with the S12 series is that with the addition of the actual hard switch selection between photo and video, I can fully set these things out here so that my photo mode has its own set of Q menu and my video options have their own set of menu options available. So let's see a couple more questions that had come in here. Can we get my menu to be on top in the menu in the next firmware? My menu will always be at the bottom of the page, or second to bottom. It's never going to go to the top of the menu system. Primarily because, and I'll show you, there is a way to force it where if you've got my menu set up, there's a way to force it where you don't really have to use any of the other menu options. Let's see here. How does Lumix see third-party lens support fitting into the future of the MFT system? I honestly, no clue. We don't typically comment or speculate on future conversations or future product or support or stuff like that. Third party is an interesting conversation. Third party in general, as far as lenses go, there are different ways to look at it. There is Alliance membership. So if we talk full frame, you've got LMAT Alliance. They're all considered first party because they all have the specifications needed for lens communication and parameters, communication info for lens information back and forth. All of that stuff is standardized, and all of the companies have part in its standardization, and the mount specification as well. When you go to Micro Four Thirds, the consortium, it is a little bit looser if you go and actually look at what the Micro Four Thirds consortium consists of. There's some information about it out there. There's a little bit more wiggle room as far as what is allowed, what needs to be standardized, what wasn't ever really standardized within that platform. So the idea of third-party lens on Micro Four Thirds gets a little bit more muddy because you're going to see more variance in features or capabilities across different optics brands and different camera combinations within the Micro Four Thirds side. The L-mount side, the full-frame side, it's a more tightly knit set of standards so that it is a much more unified experience across the board. But you'll always still have some of those things like I mentioned at the beginning where in some cases optics, because of timing of their release, their development purpose, the technologies available to particular companies at a time, may not fully mesh, but the core functionality of the optics, so focusing speed, burst rates, lens corrections, the profiling that has to be done for making sure that aberrations are corrected or distortions are corrected. All that stuff is part of the communication, and you also make sure that it's properly designed for it. So physically, it's properly designed. The contacts are properly aligned. You don't run into a situation where a quote-unquote third-party or non-membered optic may have the design spec wrong, and maybe their communication pins are slightly off, and that could cause problems because there does have to be power run through some of those pins. Maybe they wired it wrong, and now you fry a lens or something like that. That's in a very extreme case. Honestly, I haven't read of anything happening with that, but those are some of the things that you typically kind of worry a little bit about, quote-unquote third-party. But Micro Four Thirds, I think, one, it is the first mirrorless mount system available in the industry. We were the first with the introduction of the G1 to mirrorless as a category. Mirrorless didn't exist before we released the G1. So ever since that point, you've just had so many different cameras and lenses being released across the board, and you've got availability for tons of options there. Is it video signal limitations that UVC and UAC can't do anamorphic desqueeze over the webcam USB feed? I've actually asked the engineering team about this. I haven't gotten an answer back yet, but it is being looked into because USB UVC is a bit different than HDMI as far as what protocols are followed, how it's sending that video feed. I would love to see desqueeze over USB-C. I think it would be awesome, but honestly, I have no idea. Let's see here. I see a lot of battery talk going on in the chat. I will comment one thing on batteries. Be very, very careful with third-party options. Third-party options out there as far as batteries go. I do not, and I never have, even when I wasn't working for a camera brand, I've never recommended the use of third-party batteries on cameras for a couple of reasons. One, if you're spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars on a piece of equipment, one, why risk it? Why risk buying a third-party option that you have no idea if they have a proper control unit in there for the battery, or a monitoring system, or a management system for the battery itself? That one, you know reputably where that battery's coming from. If there's a problem with it, are you going to get support? What's the quality like? Are the contacts actually what they say they are? Is the battery actually the right voltage and everything that it claims it is? So batteries that go into your cameras, I have always been very against use of. Now, it is your camera, it is your product. If you want to try using third-party batteries, it is up to you. Just know that if damage is caused by those batteries, or damage is determined to be caused by those batteries, usually those are things that we don't really have a way to help you with. In general, you'll see a couple of different measurements or commentary about third-party batteries and the ratings and stuff that you see on them. For the modern cameras, the BLK22 is a 2200 milliamp hour battery. It's 7.2 volt, 16 watt hour. That's what the battery is rated for. Our cameras, you know, if you're going to use USB-C for powering, they can take an input of 9 volt 3 amp, which it needs 9 volt 3 amp so that it can charge and provide power. So that's one of the things that is required in that particular case. The batteries themselves, you'll see a couple of different options out there where maybe they list that they have a higher milliamp hour, or that, you know, they claim fast charging or stuff like that. A lot of that stuff I get a little skeptical about. I'm not telling you that, you know, you obviously can't do that. Some of you have had a lot of really good luck with some third-party batteries and all that stuff. I get it. Battery pricing is one of those things that, you know, depending on the region that you're in, some regions I hear battery costs can be much higher because either, you know, exchange rates, or the dealer itself, or the location you're trying to buy it, they don't stock them well enough. But my word of wisdom to a lot of people would be, especially as you start to get higher and higher quality cameras, or higher and higher investment into this industry, be careful with third-party batteries that go into your camera. You don't want to have them swell. You don't want to have them all of a sudden randomly cut out on you because the cells are lower quality. You just want to be careful with that stuff. Genuine batteries, if a problem happens with a genuine battery, it's something that the manufacturer can attempt to do something about. If it's a third-party battery, you're on your own at that point. With the modern cameras and adapters like... I do have it out. And adapters like the DCC-18, which is a battery interface, or battery delete, with a USB-C pigtail, you can move on to using different solutions like V-mount batteries that have USB-C protocol that is going to output the right voltage and amperage needed to power the camera that way. The USB-C port being designed for USB-C 9 volt 3 amp input, you can always do it that way as well. So just keep that kind of stuff in mind. Yeah. Do third-party battery chargers run the same risk? I currently use a K&F Concept battery charger with the original BLK22 batteries. There's always potential risks especially with battery chargers. The bigger risks are really down more to overcharging. Modern, like high-quality battery chargers typically communicate with the battery itself to understand its charge level, so that it doesn't just straight up always constantly push power into the battery as you have it plugged onto the charger. In some cases, if you're using, a really, really cheap battery charger, you're going to burn through your batteries really fast because you're the battery charger's constantly trying to pump power into it. They also typically are made of cheaper materials, so like one bump, one drop, that thing's broken now. So yeah, you have to be a little careful with it. If you're going to go third-party battery chargers, buy reputable. Buy from brands that you trust, and from locations that give you assurances or warranty or some way to support your purchase. There's a lot of e-waste on the market that's being pawned off as good enough product, for especially around the battery side of the industry. My camera is insured, and I am an electrician for appliances and systems, and my third-party batteries are safe. I measure them, and they are safe, but not every third-party battery is safe. I think that's probably one of the better ways to put it. I love chicken. Is that, sure, some you may luck out. You may be fine. A lot of them may not be fine. But just remember, like all products, it's a risk. It's up to each of us to manage that risk, how much we're willing to take on some of those different parts of the risk. Personally, I know after having third-party batteries fail, after having inexpensive memory cards fail, after having cheap microphones fail, there's a reason I will never use them. Not never. There's a reason why I won't rely on them. If I'm ever working in an event or I need something to be, this has to work, I cannot let this fail, I'm buying brand everything, not just camera equipment. I do that for the vast majority of stuff. But be clear, it is an expensive thing in some cases. It is something that you have to be aware of. All right, I think I got through those questions for now. Is there a manual or something where it tells when contrast focus is enabled or PDAF? Example, what recording modes enable which AF mode? No, there is no formalized setting out there. The system will automatically choose the appropriate autofocus system depending on what parameters you have in the camera. I don't think any of the camera companies list any of that stuff out there. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's. What else did I have in here? Function button configuration. All right. Let's have to. Bro didn't have to read out their username. Huh? But I like the username. I love chicken is an awesome username if that's what you're referencing. I love that name. That's awesome. Do you have a recommendation for gluing the rubber grip back to a G9 Mark II? E6000, Pillabond. I would use, if you don't plan on sending the camera in to have the grip material replaced, which you can do, you can send the product in, have the grip material replaced. You may have to pay for it, unless there's a reason why, it would be a warranty covered thing. Then I wouldn't glue it yourself. I would just send it in and have it taken care of, because then it's properly fit, it's properly adhered, all that kind of stuff, and it all gets replaced. If you want to do it yourself, you just got to be careful about the glue that you use, the material, how it reacts with the different materials, because you've got magnesium alloy, you've got some plastic, you've got the rubberized material in the grip. They're all going to have different adhesion qualities. They're going to react different to the type of adhesive that you're using. Some adhesives are going to discolor the grip if you don't get it right. But typically, if the grip starts to pull away, or it's been torn or something has happened with the grip material, usually, even if you can glue it back, it's usually pulling away because it's being changed in some way. There's an effect happening to it, which means it's not going to be shaped correctly to the metal underneath it or the plastic underneath it. So even with gluing, it may not ever actually fully seat back into the spot, which is usually why at that point I recommend sending it in to be serviced, because the whole thing's going to get cleaned and it's going to get, you know, a proper new grip put on it. It kind of, it goes down to really, I think, more how often do you use it? How hard are you on your equipment? Is it something that, you know, if you send it in, get the whole thing, you know, clean, checked, all that kind of stuff as a service and have them replace the grips. Anytime service has to get done to any kind of internal piece on the camera, the grips have to be replaced anyway. As far as I understand, they'd have to. But yeah. Figure the heat of Central California is melting the glue and maybe deforming the rubber, like you say. So the general heat that we would experience and be like, I'm in Texas, the heat over the summer, that's not going to melt the glue. That's not going to deform the rubber. They are tested for that kind of stuff. More likely what's happening, oils from your skin, pressure applied, storage, moisture, if it's, you know, if it got forced down into the glue underneath the grip material, those are all kinds of things. It's a wear point on the product, so it's never going to stay perfectly fine through the entire lifespan of the product, because all it takes is a little bit of a change, you know, a little bit of a situation to let something get in there and start to pull. That's kind of one of the just challenges with it. Yeah. I missed the repair talk, but the S9 back dial repair, how long does that take? That I don't know. I would recommend, if you've got that kind of stuff, anyone that has any kind of service related or questions about timing or turnaround or stuff like that, you definitely would want to contact the service team, because they're the only ones that are going to be able to give you any kind of that information. I can't even really speculate on it. And from Jake, I'll look into sending it in. Thanks. Yeah, and that's a good point of, here's a shameless plug. That's a good point of LPS, even the red tier. Get on the red tier if you don't already, because should you ever need to send a product into us for service and support, you have a portal to do it. You don't have to go through the general service and support, you know, where our microwaves or TVs, like all that kind of product goes through. This is dedicated to Lumix, so just get yourself registered on it. You don't even have to do the platinum one. Just do the regular red tier, because then you've got a portal for it if you ever need any kind of service and support for it. So, all right. Last two things that I want to cover here to be able to make sure that I can cut these up for you all later is function button configuration and Real Time LUT. Now, I am pairing these two into the same topic because after the recent firmware updates with the Real Time LUT system coming across the vast majority of our cameras, it ties into the function button configurations with many of them outside of the S9, since the S9 has the LUT button on it. So, to start with, function buttons within the Lumix cameras, you can access them by pressing the menu set button. You can go down into the setup menu, move my camera back, which is the custom menu, which is the gear icon. And then you're going to come down and you're going to look for the option that says FN button set, which, if I remember right, is right here, which would be under operations page 1. It's going to be under the same options that we saw Q menu settings, and where you'd find your touch settings. If your camera has a lock lever, this is where you'd find all those. You're going to look for FN button set. So FN button set, what do you get? Well, if I go into this, you'll see I've got 3 different choices. I've got FN buttons for photo, FN buttons for video and slow and quick, and then also FN buttons for playback. So let's start with photo. So if I go into photo, you'll get a little diagram of whichever camera you're on, and you'll have a couple different options that are already preset. That would be your kind of normal things. So on this one, particularly with the S1 Mark II-E, you've got your white balance, ISO, and exposure comp. Those are the top 3 right behind the shutter button. Hey, guess what? You can change them. They'll still be labeled, obviously, but you can change them if you don't want to use them. For the photographers that never want to touch video, don't care about video, and don't want anything to do with video on your cameras, that red record button, you can change it. I can come in here and I can say, hey, I don't want that to do video record. I want that to be, let's change this to luminance spot meter. I want that to be an exposure tool. So you don't have to have the video record buttons actually do video. You can just treat them as if they're a general function button. You've got a number of other lists here, but also on the camera, you'll have your front function buttons, and then you'll have this setup here. Some people don't necessarily recognize what this part is, but this is for your touch FN buttons. So this is where if you enable touch tab, which I'll show you in a second, this is where if you enable touch tab, you can add an additional 2, 4, 5 function buttons to the camera. By default, these are Wi-Fi, histogram, and stabilization, and then there's 2 open, but you can change these just like the others to pretty much anything that you want. So if you've ever wondered what those are, where they are, because you can't find them, they're in here, and you have to enable 1 additional step to get it. You'll also notice that you've got 4-way direction on the D-pad here. So you've got up, down, left, right, right around your menu set button. And then you'll also notice that you've got a bunch of them around the joystick, but they're grayed out. I can't change them. How do I do that? I'll show you one little trick on that as well. The video options, it's the exact same. You have the same options, the same settings, just more of your video-oriented stuff. And in both options, you can pick what it is that you want to be assigned to it. This just changes depending on where your dial is for photo, video, or slow and quick. But last, you've got playback mode function buttons. Now, by default, a number of these are turned off. But if you're someone who does a lot of rating of your images in camera, so I want to be able to say, hey, I want this particular, I want this particular image to be a 3-star, a 5-star, a 1-star, a 2-star. You can do that in the camera. By default, the AF on button when you're reviewing photos and videos will tag them to be a 3-star. But if you would prefer changing this to put it somewhere, I can change my white balance buttons up here to different options. Magnify from AF point. I can adjust whether or not I want my LUT preview or my hybrid log gamma previews. Your desqueeze display on and off. You can do HEIF to JPEG conversion options in some of these things. You can protect images. So if you are someone who is in the habit of deleting images off through the camera, you can apply a protection to a particular photo. You can change ratings up to 5-star. You can trigger copying. All of these different options you have in the playback menu. So this lets you go in and make a bunch of different changes and customizations without necessarily needing to go all the way through the hoops to find a particular setup. Now, I mentioned that there were those other function buttons on the back, where if I'm in, let me go back to photo, and we'll go page 3, around the joystick. So you have to activate these by choosing what you want your joystick to do. This can really change how you use your camera. The vast majority of people want the joystick to control your focus points and move it where you want your focus to go. But if you go into the joystick settings menu, you can make a couple of shifts. Defocus, or direct movement, means that the joystick is going to move your focus point, whatever you've had it selected on. So if I'm on single point focus, I can use my joystick and it lets me move my focus point around. If I press it in the center, it goes back to the middle. Press it again, it goes back to the prior. If I change this to function, now my joystick will not move my focus point. It will not shift when I push the menu set button. Instead, if I go into the menu, it will let me assign a function to the direction that that particular option's being moved. So this means that I've got up to, 5 of them. So up, down, left, right, and then push would all be 3 particular, or 5 different functions that I could be adding to it. The downside of this, obviously, is that now my joystick doesn't move my focus point. The other option is you can set it to menu, which means if I push the joystick button in, it now controls my menu. If I use the directions, left, right, up, down, it doesn't change anything. So vast majority are probably going to leave this on direct movement, but you do have an option to shift this and adjust for different function buttons and different controls. All right, I saw a couple more recommendations or a couple more mentions in here. In the Platinum tier of the membership, is it a normal camera strap or a special one for members? It is a Peak Design collaborative strap. I don't have mine quickly accessible. It's one of the Peak Design slide or sling straps that has Lumix Pro Service embroidered on it. Is there a maintenance schedule or recommended maintenance that should be performed? I've had my S5 IIX for a little over 2 years, 0 issues, and never serviced. I mean, there's not really like a recommended maintenance kind of sequence for cameras. I think it more comes down to your level of use with the product. If you shoot weddings, events, portrait sessions where you're getting a ton of use out of the camera, they're in and out of camera bags or cases, they're constantly going through vastly different environments that you're using the cameras in, it's probably worth getting in the habit of having the cameras checked, kind of cleaned and serviced seasonally. It's one of the reasons why with the Platinum service you get annual sensor cleanings and calibrations and firmware updates and all that kind of stuff. Because back when I did shoot and assist in weddings, about every season we were sending the products out. So we'd be heavy in the summer, and then over the winter there'd be maybe a month or 2 months where things were much lighter. So we would send all of the camera equipment in. Or not all of it. We'd stage it. We'd send the bulk of the equipment in, leave us enough for pickup jobs. All that stuff would go in, be serviced, cleaned. Lenses would be calibrated because this was back in the DSLR day. Focus systems would be calibrated. Firmware would be updated if we didn't happen to get around to doing it. We'd get it back, send the other stuff in. And then this way, when we start the season, the maintenance that we're doing is sensor cleanings throughout the year. Modern stuff, it really is up to you. If you shoot in seriously stressing conditions, then it's probably worth sending it in, once a year, maybe once every other year. If you're really good at keeping your equipment maintained, you can stretch those out. It doesn't affect service of the camera. It's more just a personal preference at that particular stage. Still wish we could use the lens to switch on off subject detect while recording. Sometimes it's necessarily to do quickly, like wanting to focus on someone's hand or ring on their finger. Yeah, I've had that request a couple of times. It has been passed up to the engineers rep. Is there any plans for some kind of face priority update? Nothing that I'm aware of or would, not that I'm aware of. Would it be possible for camera ratings on photos to show in LUMIX Lab? It would make a lot easier to see which was... So the rating system does show in Lab. This actually got me a couple of times. So let me actually go to the camera to show this. So the rating system does work, and it does show up in Lab. It shows up in Sync. It shows up across the different tools. It shows up in Photoshop and everything. The issue, typically, is that if I take a bunch of pictures, if I take a bunch of pictures, I'm going to see if I can actually demo this. So I'm just going to format the card that I just put in here. So let's switch to photo, and let's grab a couple images here. I'm going to do this. We're going to change this to, these are going to be terrible. All right, right? I just took a bunch of photos. If I go into playback and we start reviewing those images, couple things to keep in mind is right above me, so right there, you see an icon that indicates what card you're reading from. In this case, it's the CF Express card. One, because it's the only card I have in the camera. But if you don't watch, you might have that set on card 1 or card 2, which would be SD card. Or if you're running a camera that's dual SD card, it might be slot 1, slot 2. If you're like me, and this is how I have my cameras set up, is I go in and I have double slot functions set on the cameras that I use for shooting. I have them set to allocation recording, where my JPEGs and HEIF images are always sent to the SD card. My raw photos and my videos are always sent to the CF Express card. The issue is that if I go into LUMIX Lab, you have an option to select which card slot you want to be looking at. If you're looking at the slot that you've got your images separated to that wasn't what you were rating on, they're not paired. If you shoot RAW and JPEG and you have everything going to one card, the ratings will show up, and then you have to just pick which format you want to have sent over. But yeah. Can you change the focus point on the touchscreen when looking through the EVF? Yes. If you want to change the focus point, you have to go into the custom menu. You want to go to touch settings. You want to go to touchpad AF. And then you've got a number of different options here. Offsets. So the brighter lit quadrant of the screen is what would be active under this offset. So you'll see offset 7 is bottom left, top left, left half, bottom right, top half, all of them. This would offset 1 means focus point. If it's in the middle and you tap on the far right of the screen, it's gonna change where it is in the middle relative. So do this a little better. So if this is my focus point and I tap the screen here and move up, it's going to move them like this. So if I pull down, hit the end of the screen, I can then tap again and pull like that, if that makes sense. The other option is exact. Exact means if, go back to this one, if my focus point was here and I tap here, my focus point now jumps to here. And then it'll always be under where my finger is. That is off by default because of a number of feedback points of nose touching the screen, things like that, shifting focus points and stuff like that. But yeah, if you want to adjust that, just come in here and do one of the offsets. But you want to make sure that touchpad AF is then turned on. So that you've got that kind of control for it. Excuse me. Now that DJI is out of the game, it's time for Lumix to start developing drones. I don't know. I'm a very big fan of Lumix. Is it possible to get the camera strap somehow in Germany because we don't have this pro service here? You would have to link up with the local Lumix reps, unfortunately. I know some of the service programs that were run or some of the events that have been held in Europe have had those straps, but yeah, I'm not sorry. Let's see here. On my G85, when I'm recording video, I could take the picture at the same time and up to a certain amount of stills. I still in G7 or SI2 because it doesn't. So yeah, the taking a screen grab while rolling video is something that's not included anymore on the cameras. Couple of reasons. One, it wasn't really ever reported back as being used often. In reality, it's very similar to the idea of 4K photo and 4K post focus. Use cases of them and reported use cases when we would survey users at trade shows and at like kind of roundtables and stuff like that, and by email and survey and like all that kind of stuff. As our cameras got faster with like burst rate shooting, less and less need for a 4K photo or a post focus or a pre-burst function in the 4K photo, 6K photo video thing made sense. So those things started getting shifted out because they were considered redundant. The photo, to snap a photo during video, so while you're rolling video, partially was made redundant because of the electronic burst rates of it, but more so because, let me see if I can demo this. I don't know if I can demo this while we are rolling. So let's go here. So if I roll, that's right, I changed that button. Let's roll a quick little video here. So just a real simple, quick 3-second video. So if I rolled a video and I want to be able to pull a still out of that because I really like that particular moment out of it, if I'm taking this and I now go into playback, if I start playing back that content and then pause the video, I can use the directional pad to move frame by frame. And then if I press the menu set button, I can save that image out. The nice thing with doing it this way is kind of the same as what doing it the other way was, where you would snap a photo while the video is rolling, is that the metadata is written. So it knows that it's a 3x2 JPEG. It knows the basic information. Knows what lens it was. So you've got a lot of the kind of quick access stuff that you would need. So I can pull it, and usually it's just a little bit better than what those older systems would go. The bigger reason, honestly, is that the image quality and the processing for the images, like to produce the higher end video, has gotten so much higher than it was years ago. So at some point you kind of have to look at it and go, is it worth developing for the on-the-fly capture of it, or is the same effect received because I'm gonna have to preview back through it? Maybe I'm not gonna hit the shutter button at the exact right time that I need, but now I can just go back through, save out the photo that I want out of the video file. So cool. Why does Japan have all the cute Lumix toys and merch? Home field advantage. Let's put it that way. All right. That covers the core of the stuff that I wanted to talk about and kind of cover today. Amazing questions from everybody. Awesome conversation. Great chat. I loved a lot of the feedback. we're going to continue this set of topics. However, I mentioned that we're going to be doing this as a series. LUMIX Live, I have to try a little bit of a shift in the programming that we're doing. Every single week for a stream, we've been doing this for 5-6 years, I think, coming up in April. Every single week for these streams is not necessarily starting to weigh a bit, but I feel that some of the content is getting a bit redundant or not as fleshed out as I would like it to be for, useful information for everybody. And now that we've launched and we're full bore in with Discord support and Reddit and, kind of really putting a lot of effort behind building the community in multiple different places, I want to try for a short period of time, at least while I'm doing this series, this 3-part series on the features, where we're going to shift the LUMIX live streams to every other week. So we have the live stream this week. The next stream would be on the 29th, then on the 12th, then on the 26th. The reason for this is, like I said, it's not that we can't keep doing weekly live streams. It's that I just want to try something a little different here. 6 years straight of almost meeting every single Thursday has been a lot of live streaming. It's a lot of time to try to make sure that I'm giving you all information and quality of feedback that you all deserve, that you've been coming and you've been viewing this channel for so long with. By breaking it out into where I can do this every other week, I can do a little bit more prep ahead of time now. I can make sure, like what I'm planning for this 3-part series, that next week I can give y'all time to be able to say, hey, I would love to see this particular piece covered, or I want to see an example of this. It gives me time to actually go out, capture, create the examples that we can then reference to on the live stream, and it doesn't have to be as on the fly where we're just looking at my desk with a bunch of cameras. So like I said, for at least this series, so through like February, the last week of February, we're going to switch to a temporary every 2 week for the live stream. To supplement this, we've got Discord. To continue these conversations, to be able to interact and chat with all of you if you have questions and it's an off week that you want to get an answer to. You can head over to Discord. The link is down in the description. You can check out our Lumix troubleshooting channel now. This is where we've consolidated basically all of the help questions. So you have that directly accessible now. So I encourage you, if you're not already, join us over on Discord. You can always tag me. I'm Sean from Lumix on Discord, so you can tag me directly. If you're over on Reddit, you can also tag me over there in questions. It's Sean at Lumix. I think it's listed what my my badge or whatever is over on Discord. I'm terrible with what like the flare and all that stuff is. So you can reach out to me still, the same level that we've been doing. Just gonna shift a couple things around because I want to keep giving the YouTube side be a little bit more quality as we're kind of growing. There's a lot more of you tuning in every single week. Our average viewership is up over per stream since the new year started, and honestly since the last couple of months. And I don't want to give you guys all a subpar experience if I'm starting to feel like I'm giving you a subpar experience, if that makes sense. So, all of that said, if you enjoyed this stream, someone just put it, Jake just put it down there. If you enjoyed the stream, consider giving us a like. If you want to have other people see this content, if you think this is beneficial experiences for others out there, maybe you know people that are questioning about whether or not Lumix is worth it to switch into as a brand, shoot them over this way. or over on the Discord. We've got a wealth of experience and a wealth of knowledge that we want to share with everybody. And I know a lot of people have questions, and maybe you're it's a little hard to get answers elsewhere. So if you know people interested, send them our way. Have them join in this community, in this conversation. To my knowledge, I think we're still the only ones that do this, at least consistently. So, yeah. With that, I will be over on Discord. I believe, actually, let me double check one other calendar piece here. Calendar. It's not next week. Okay, it's February. So if you've got questions, like I said, head over to Discord, join us over there, tag me at Sean from Lumix, and I'll answer your questions. We do also do a live stream once a month over on Discord as well. That's just for the Discord viewership. So if you want to join us over on those, the event calendar is listed on there. Check us out over on Instagram. TikTok if you like doom scrolling and watching some funny content. And yeah, I will be back in 2 weeks on January 29th for the next edition of our Back to Basics series, where we're going to be talking about the photography basics, the functions, capabilities, how you get to them. In the meantime, if you have questions that you want me to cover in that particular stream, drop them in the comment section down below. And yeah, we'll get to them in the next live stream, which will be right here on YouTube on the 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Other than that, have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. Get out there, create some cool stuff. Share it with others around you. And yeah, see y'all later. Bye.